Boundary Resistance and the Psychology of Perceived Power. This paper examines why individuals experience annoyance or hostility when they are unable to forcibly extract information from others they subconsciously perceive as subordinate. Drawing from psychological theories of control, entitlement, ego defense, and status regulation, it argues that such reactions stem from violated expectations of dominance rather than the denied information itself. The paper further explores practical boundary-setting mechanisms that effectively neutralize these dynamics without escalation, demonstrating how consistent autonomy assertion destabilizes coercive interpersonal strategies. Individuals often experience irritation or hostility when they are unable to extract information from others they subconsciously perceive as subordinate. Notably, this emotional response is frequently disproportionate to the value of the information being withheld, suggesting that the reaction is not driven by curiosity alone. Rather, it reflects a disruption of implicit power expectations. This paper argues that annoyance in these situations arises primarily from a perceived loss of control or dominance, not from the denial of information itself. Humans routinely construct mental hierarchies that organize social interactions according to perceived influence and control. These hierarchies are informed by roles, prior compliance, institutional authority, and cultural norms, and they typically operate outside of conscious awareness. As a result, individuals may develop an unexamined expectation that certain others will comply with requests for information. This expectation often manifests as a sense of entitlement, in which access to another person's thoughts, decisions, or experiences is assumed rather than negotiated. The emotional response to such refusal is closely tied to perceived threats to status and self-concept. A boundary that limits informational access implicitly communicates autonomy, signaling that the person being questioned does not recognize the assumed hierarchy. For individuals who rely on dominance cues to regulate their sense of competence or importance, this can register as a status threat. Psychologically, status threats are processed rapidly and emotionally, often producing irritation or anger before conscious reasoning occurs. The refusal creates cognitive dissonance between the belief that one has influence and the lived experience of failing to exert it, generating discomfort that seeks immediate resolution. Rather than revising their self-perception or assumptions about power, individuals often resolve this dissonance through defensive reinterpretation. The person withholding information may be labeled as secretive, uncooperative, or deceptive, reframing the interaction in a way that preserves the questioner's self-image. This reframing externalizes responsibility for the discomfort and justifies continued pressure or hostility. In this way, annoyance functions as an ego defense, protecting a sense of authority from conscious scrutiny. For some individuals, control over information also serves a regulatory emotional function. Extracting information can reduce uncertainty, reinforce feelings of competence, and provide reassurance of social standing. When this control mechanism fails, the resulting anxiety may surface as frustration or aggression rather than vulnerability. This helps explain why the emotional reaction can appear outsized relative to the situation. The refusal disrupts an internal stabilizing process rather than a simple exchange of facts. Boundary enforcement in these contexts is therefore not merely a communicative act, but a disruptive one. By refusing to disclose information without justification, individuals assert self-governance and reject implicit dominance claims. Such boundaries redistribute power within the interaction, which is why they frequently provoke pushback even when delivered calmly and politely. Effective boundary setting relies on declarative statements that assert finality without explanation. Brief refusals signal autonomy while minimizing opportunities for negotiation, as justifications tend to invite debate and imply hierarchical authority in the listener. Consistency is central to this process. Repeating the boundary without variation or emotional escalation deprives coercive strategies of reinforcement and communicates that persistence will not yield compliance. Managing escalation involves controlling not only the topic, but the structure of the interaction itself. Acknowledging another person's emotional reaction without conceding authority can diffuse intensity while maintaining autonomy. In cases where pressure continues, changing the subject, limiting engagement, or ending the interaction altogether reinforces the boundary at a structural level. In contexts involving formal power imbalances, such as workplaces or institutions, framing boundaries in role-based or policy-based language can reduce personalization and limit retaliation. Pushback in response to boundaries, manifesting as annoyance, sarcasm, or guilt-inducing behavior, should be understood as an indicator of disrupted control rather than boundary failure. These reactions reflect the withdrawal symptoms of a challenged dominance expectation. Recognizing this pattern allows individuals to interpret resistance accurately and avoid internalizing blame for others' emotional responses. In conclusion, annoyance in response to withheld information is best understood as a reaction to violated power assumptions rather than to informational deprivation. Boundaries succeed not by persuading others of their legitimacy, but by asserting autonomy through clarity, consistency, and emotional neutrality. By recognizing the psychological mechanisms underlying these interactions, individuals can protect their autonomy more effectively while reducing unnecessary conflict and self-doubt.